Have you ever been on the receiving end of a backhanded compliment like, great presentation, though I guess anyone could have done it with a little more time? It stings. It really stings. It leaves you questioning yourself, your relationships at work, and even your ability to communicate effectively. I have been there too, and I know how frustrating and disempowering it can feel. Today, we're tackling a very important topic that affects many of us. Passive-aggressive behavior in the workplace. These subtle but damaging behaviors, procrastination, the silent treatment, the indirect criticism, they erode trust. They create tension. They hold your team back. And I say your team because here's the thing. Unless you have actively worked on this, you are almost certainly just a little bit passive-aggressive. I count myself in that too. But here's the good news. It doesn't actually take much. If you have the intention to not be passive-aggressive, it doesn't have to be an inherent trait. It's something we learn from others. But with the right tools and mindset, we can unlearn it. The problem is we've all learned it because it's so pervasive. So in this episode, I'm going to break down how to identify these behaviors, their impact on the people around you, giving you a bit of a pep talk to let go of some of the things that we think are totally acceptable, and giving you some actionable steps to transform your behavior into positive, empowering leadership interactions. In case you didn't know, I'm Dr. Toni Collis, a leadership coach passionate about helping women in tech develop the skills to lead with confidence and authenticity and change the world as we do it. I have years of experience as a leader myself, but now latterly as an executive coach, addressing workplace dynamics, and I'm here to guide you through this journey of self-awareness, growth, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. Passive aggressive. You all heard that. Do you know what it means? I want you to know that passive aggressive behaviors are not inherent in that they aren't something that we absolutely have to have, but we all have them because of the world we live in. They're often modeled to us by others, whether it's past managers, colleagues, family. Hey, I don't know any family that doesn't have some passive aggressive traits. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone avoid conflict by making that sarcastic remark or withholding communication? I had a client many moons ago now who said to me, people that couldn't deal with her being sarcastic, she couldn't work with. She could not understand that her sarcasm was causing people pain. Sarcasm is never a tool to use as a leader, but often it's seen as acceptable. We learn these tactics as coping mechanisms in an environment where direct communication feels unsafe, unwelcome, just too exhausting. Here's the thing. Using humor, sarcasm, silence, backhanded compliments, vague feedback, that is lazy leadership. I want you to realize that you can do something better and you are going to find life easier if you do this. One of my clients, a senior tech leader, had this realization with me recently, which is why we're recording this episode. We were talking about where her behaviors had come from. She realized she was mimicking a previous manager from quite early on in her career. That manager would give her feedback on an almost daily basis that was vague. That manager would give her backhanded compliments such as, this is fine, but I expected more from someone at your level. Something that's very frustrating. And when we were digging into why she was working with me because her team were not performing. She'd actually been put on a PIP as a leader because she was getting such bad performance reviews. And when we were digging into this, part of the issue was she had found herself mirroring this behavior with her own team. Vague feedback, backhanded compliments, unintentionally creating frustration with the team. And she was experiencing the frustration herself and had done in the past, but she was now feeding that down the line. And guess what? Things went wrong. But the good news is she fixed this. And that's what we're going to do today. I want you to know that passive aggressive behaviors can be unlearned. In fact, it's one of the easier things to unlearn, in my opinion, because I think passive aggressive behavior is often an excuse to shy away from something uncomfortable. It's a reflection of the environment that we've been in. And I was actually just earlier today recording another episode for this podcast with a guest where we were talking about culture and that we as leaders get to embrace the culture and we get to reflect on the culture. We get to be the culture in the room, which means if you're not liking the behavior of people around you, you're not liking the passive aggressiveness, you get to be the one that changes that environment rather than reflecting the environment back on itself. You can choose this is not who we are as a team. You can help remove the shame. You can allow us to focus on growth, understanding, and clarity, and let go of passive aggressiveness. Here's your first key takeaway for today's episode. You're likely more passive aggressive than you think you are, because most of us are. Instead of labeling yourself this way, though, I want you to consider how you can elevate your communication to foster a more positive and constructive work environment. I want you to realize that passive aggressive behavior thrives when there's ambiguity. And part of our job as leaders is to receive ambiguity from above. But if you can turn that into clarity and honesty, you break that cycle going downwards. There is a necessity of ambiguity in the workplace. An exceptional leader has to be able to absorb ambiguity. But if you don't address it head on, you are going to then perpetuate passive aggressiveness. That doesn't mean that every leader who hands down ambiguity is passive aggressive. That doesn't mean your boss is passive aggressive. But it means that it's very easy to become passive aggressive when there is ambiguity. But the key thing here is the kind of ambiguity we're talking about. Ambiguity from above about direction for the company, or we don't know how to solve this problem, is not passive aggressive. Ambiguity that says, I don't like what you did, but doesn't tell you why they didn't like what you did, that is passive aggressive. We need clarity. We need honesty. We need frank conversations with kindness. That's how we break this cycle. Here's the deal. Passive aggressiveness is often under the radar. It's subtle. It's indirect. It's disguised as humor or even politeness. Yes, you got to love that one. But it erodes trust. It creates confusion. It stalls productivity. As leaders, if you've got a failing team, you need to look in on this. Are you perpetuating behaviors and overlooking these behaviors in ourselves that allow ambiguity to thrive, that passes down? Are you shining light or are you dimming potential? For example, have you been in a meeting where somebody nodded in agreement, but later resisted the plan through inaction? You got to love these people, right? Now, have you ever been that person? I know that's an uncomfortable place to self-reflect, but I want you reflecting here. I want you asking yourself with everything I say in this episode, this is uncomfortable, but have I ever done that? Because you probably have done everything I'm going to talk about. If you can't identify that you've done it and stopped doing it, you're probably still doing it. So this is one of these episodes where I want you, with a pen, asking yourself, when did I last do that? How have I actively stopped myself doing that? I've never actively stopped myself doing it. Okay, I need to start actively stopping, because we all do all of these things. We roll our eyes. Funny story here. My husband lost it with me last night. Not lost it, but like got irritated with me because I rolled my eyes. Rolled my eyes when he described my cat. She's been a bit of a bully recently. She's back to being top cat. She is the tiniest cat we have and the oldest cat we have. But she's got back to being top cat and she's been a bit of a bully recently. So when my husband was telling me about how she was outside with the kittens guarding the back doorstep, I rolled my eyes because I thought immediately, oh, she's stopping the kittens coming back in, which, we're trying to introduce them to the outside world. And so I rolled my eyes. He got irritated with me because the roll eye during a discussion just derails it. Now, he was actually trying to tell me that she was being the motherly figure, which is lovely. That's what she used to be like. She was guarding them at the back door rather than guarding the back door to stop them coming back in, which she has done with some other older cats. Yes, we are crazy cat people. But even I fall into this trap is my point. I rolled my eyes. My husband just got annoyed with me, quite rightly. I jumped to a conclusion that meant he felt like, what's the point in even having this conversation? It was just exhausting for him. And I fully understand that because I've been in that situation too. My point here is that you are doing these things. I teach this stuff and I still did it just last night. But I want you to realize that they have a negative impact. They harm collaboration. They harm morale. So I'm going to now break this down for you step by step, explaining some of the most common passive-aggressive behaviors, how they show up, the impact they're going to have, understanding this behavior in yourself, and give you some tactics to constructively create a more positive open work environment. But you're going to have to work at each of these. You're going to have to identify where they come up, and then you're going to have to choose to be different. They're subtle, but they have a powerful impact, both negatively when we lean into the passive-aggressive piece and positively when we lean away from it. So when we identify them, we can start addressing root causes of behavior. We're going to shift the culture. We're going to shift communication in our teams. We're going to lead by example. So here we go. Some definitions, lots of impact, and what you need to be doing differently. Number one, the first passive-aggressive trait, indirect criticism, when we make sarcastic remarks, backhanded compliments instead of providing constructive feedback. Maybe a team member suggests a new feature for product and you respond with, sure, that's a good idea if we had unlimited time and resources. So much pain and sarcasm. It's exhausting to address that constructively. It creates confusion. It discourages innovation. It stops people speaking up. What we need to do is ensure that we are addressing our concerns head on. You want to have a discussion about the time and resources rather than undermining the trust and stopping open communication. You want your team to feel encouraged to bring ideas to the table and encouraged to think more proactively. So if you have a concern about what they're saying, you need to address that concern. You need to say, that's a great idea in principle. Here's where I'm seeing some issues with that. Would you agree with me? How would you update it? You want to coach them through how you would think through that. One, you might find as you coach through that you shouldn't just dismiss this out of hand. But two, if you can coach them through that, they're going to bring better ideas next time that they thought through more fully. So indirect criticism, using sarcasm, backhanded compliments, your first one to watch out for. The classic is also not just if we had unlimited, whatever. Another one I see there is, we've already tried that. It's an indirect criticism, like you've come up with a stupid idea. Item number 2, procrastination. And here's one where you really have to be self-aware because we often procrastinate because we are uncomfortable. When we delay responses or decisions to avoid confrontation or responsibility, or this is just uncomfortable for us to do something around, then we are saying, I'll get to it soon, but this is not important enough. You leave somebody stuck, unable to move forward. This is a key one that doesn't feel like it's passive aggressive, but it's frustrating your team members. It signals a lack of care, accountability. It says they are not important. You're stalling them by your discomfort. You're harming collaboration and productivity because you are uncomfortable. So this is definitely one where you have to level up your self-awareness and look for when you are delaying things because you are uncomfortable. And then you have to realize the cost, the human cost, and step away from it. Next, number 3, the silent treatment. Withholding communication to express displeasure, exert control in some way. Maybe, we've all seen this one. Disagreement in a meeting, then you just don't respond to emails or Slack, leaving that person feeling isolated, unsure of how to proceed. Now, I actually had somebody do this to me fairly recently. Somebody didn't agree with what I was asking them to do, and they just gave me the silent treatment. And it's interesting receiving that as the CEO, I tell you, that was surprising to me. But what it does is create a toxic environment where there was no trust anymore. And that sense, I felt like I couldn't support the person. I was like, why can't we have a conversation about this? We clearly disagree. I actually think disagreement is a very healthy thing, but we weren't able to have a conversation about it. And, that is hugely on me. How did we get to that point is on me. But at the same time, I want you to ask yourself, where are you expressing displeasure or exerting control by giving somebody the silent treatment? Where are you encouraging isolation? Where are you saying we're unsure how to proceed? Again, this comes a little bit down to the confidence piece. Sometimes we do it because we don't know how else to have that conversation. That is not an excuse, my love. It is a terrible excuse. Not knowing how to have a conversation is not leadership. You need to tackle it head on. You need to get that person around the room, because without it, you are creating a toxic environment, and the trust is leaving in a flood. So make sure you look out for any temptation to give people the silent treatment. Okay, number 4, feigning agreement. Maybe you agree to tasks, decisions, and meetings, but then undermine that through inaction or a subtle resistance. Now, the really toxic version of this is the one where you may not realize how toxic you're being, which is saying yes to something, but saying yes because you felt you should say yes, but having zero time to do anything about it. You are going to then be inactive, which comes across in the same way as you deliberately feigning agreement and then taking zero action or being subtly resistant. The person receiving this subtle resistance doesn't know the difference between you being overwhelmed and being a yes person, or you just being I don't know how to say no person. So if you find yourself in a meeting nodding along for a new project, a new plan, but then you quietly tell yourself or your team, I don't think this is going to work. Or you just fail to follow through because either you don't like it, you subtly disagree, you just don't know how to voice that, or you are overwhelmed, then you are leading to inefficiency. You are damaging your credibility as a leader. You are creating confusion, and you are misaligning your entire team. So watch out for being the yes person or just being uncomfortable with disagreement. If you agree to things which you don't really get, you need to do something about it. Now, the flip side, just to derail the passive-aggressive conversation, is I will often talk to my leaders that I coach about when they do need to get on board. Just recently, talking to one of my clients, actually, just last week, a new strategic imperative has come in her company, and she is being tasked with rolling it out. And I said to her, okay, you're going to go into this strategy meeting with the executive team. What are you going to do? How are you going to approach this with them? And she said, well, I'm going to ask questions. I need to understand why they've done this. I need to change their minds. And I said, really? You're going to change their minds? This has been agreed with the board. I know you weren't in the room, but this has been agreed. She was like, oh, okay, what do I do? And I said to her, this is your time to decide to get on board even though you don't like it. You aren't going to change their strategy. This is the time to step up and be the leader that delivers anyway. So there is a time to get on board with something you don't agree with, but that is not the same thing as feigning agreement. This is saying, I don't like it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it is my job to do it. There is a time for that. There's a time for disagreeing. There's a time for pushing back. There's a time for saying, I think we could do this differently. But there is a time for saying, I don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So look out for when you are feigning agreement, being that yes person, where you undermine a decision, especially if, and we're going to talk about gossiping in a minute, it's another passive aggressive trait. But if you find yourself going to your team and saying, I don't think we should work on this, that is gossip plus feigning agreement. It's so toxic. It's unbelievable. Actually, what it means is your team, you kind of think you're building camaraderie with your team, but your team actually learns you have two faces and they can't trust you. Okay, that brings me to item number 5. I think we're on at this point. Blaming others, shifting responsibility for mistakes, not owning responsibility. I have done this and I am still ashamed of it. I've done everything we've talked about here. This one, I properly am ashamed of. There was a time when I could legitimately blame somebody else, don't get me wrong. But I was the boss, I was the leader, and I should have owned it. So if something's delayed, if somebody's done something you think, oh gosh, that was not good, but they're in your team, you have to take responsibility rather than shifting it onto others. If you don't, you're saying that you don't back your team. It erodes trust, it erodes accountability. It creates a culture of fear and defensiveness. Rather than saying the developers didn't finish on time, you need to say, we weren't able to finish on time. Unfortunately, this was an unrealistic timeline. Or there were communication gaps. You need to be in the we with your team on this one. Passive-aggressive trait number 6 is withholding praise. I had a boss once who said to me, they don't give out praise because they don't want people getting cocky. It's just like, all right then. Okay, so how do people know if they've done well? We live in a world where people are lacking confidence, when people don't know when they've done good things, where we are always looking out for what we've done wrong rather than what we've done well. If you perpetuate that by deliberately not acknowledging people's achievements or contributions, you are going to lower morale, motivation, you're going to have disengagement, and you're going to have very high turnover rates. So recognize the developer who did an amazing job in the last sprint. Recognize your team doing their job this week. Make sure you recognize people doing their day job, not just going above and beyond. One of the ways this is done even more passive aggressively is when you always single out the overachiever. Here's the thing. The overachievers are going to get recognized. They're going to get promoted. They're going to go far in their careers. Being in a workplace where you have special kudos, and it's always the same people getting that kudos. I worked somewhere where they used to give bottles of champagne out every quarter for, high achievers. And everybody knew it was the same people every time. Partly it was the managers those people had were always nominating them. And the rest of us were so resentful. It's like we can't do anything. One of the best things you can do is recognize everybody for where they're at. Now, that doesn't mean finding reasons to celebrate somebody who is underachieving. It really, really doesn't. In fact, over on LinkedIn, you'll find a video I did a few weeks ago with a head of HR, Jen Paxton, who talked about what to do when you're labeled an underachiever. Go and listen to that. It's so important, whether you're the leader or you have been labeled an underachiever, you've been put on a pip. Such a great conversation. And I'm not asserting that we should lie to people and say, you're doing a great job. That is terrible. That is how we lead to people being on pips without them knowing ahead of time. It should never be a surprise when somebody gets that official HR label put on them, right? HR being involved should be one of the last things to happen. So don't do that. But at the same time, if people are doing their jobs, acknowledge them. Make sure they feel valued. Item number 7, nonverbal cues. When you use your body language, that eye rolling I talked about at the beginning, sighing, whatever they are, and you're expressing disapproval without verbalizing it. You might do this one accidentally. If you cross your arms, that can be a nonverbal cue. And I'm somebody who does that a lot. Now, this is one of those ones where you can accidentally do it, because if you are somebody who naturally crosses your arms, then you can come across as giving those negative nonverbal cues that express disapproval without doing it deliberately. But if you then add in a sigh, then you are suggesting an idea isn't good enough. You're making them feel judged, maybe meaning that they don't want to contribute further. They're going to hesitate. Here's the thing. Nonverbal cues are open to misinterpretation. They create tension. They create misunderstanding. They hinder effective communication. Come out and say it. But as a leader, your communication, remember the majority of communication is nonverbal. Your communication, how you use your body, how you use your hands, your arms, your eyes, it's all incredibly important. You have to be so alert as a leader to how your body is going along with what you're saying or countering it. If you aren't, it's so easy to fall into a passive-aggressive trait. Number 8, gossip. I told you this was coming. Being the person who talks about people behind their backs rather than addressing things directly. We've all had this boss. The boss who ingratiates themselves by gossiping. When you are the person that says, oh, they missed that deadline. I just don't know why they can't get it together, to one of your team about another team member, or in fact, anybody in the company. It breeds distrust. It divides teams. It damages relationships. It damages collaboration. It is just a terrible idea. I've had the boss who does this. I've had a couple of bosses that have done this actually over the years. And they think they're building camaraderie. They never are. It just means that everybody goes, just don't share anything with that person. You're not building camaraderie. You are gossiping. Never, ever engage in gossip. If somebody comes to you to gossip, shut it down, back away. If you can't, because they're your boss, try and shut it down. But if you can't, don't engage. Just get out of there as quickly as you can. Don't do the eye roll. That's not going to do you any favors. Talking from experience on that one. Okay, my ninth and final passive-aggressive trait that I want you watching out for. Setting unrealistic expectations. Impossible deadlines. Telling people they just need to work harder. Unclear instructions. Indirect punishments. Maybe you said you got to complete that late on a Friday afternoon and you expect it done by Monday morning. You know they're going to struggle to meet the deadline. What you're saying is your personal life is less important than this job. It leads to burnout. It leads to frustration, resentment. It stifles productivity. It does not increase productivity despite what's being talked about in the medium right now. It really does not. What it does is mean that people are looking for an exit. Now, if you're in certain companies at the moment, certain companies are relying on this. At the moment, there are a lot of people on the hiring market. They say, I know this person's not going to leave because they want this job. Here's what's going to happen. As always, we have a cycle. We're going to have an employee-friendly market soon. Your high potentials who are being treated like that, they're the first ones to exit. You lose all of their knowledge. It is never a good thing to set impossible deadlines, to have unclear instructions, to punish people for not giving up their personal lives. It does not do your company any favors. You might get a small win once or twice. It's going to bite you in the back soon enough. Now, I don't think many of you listening to this really operate this way. I have some people coming to me who are having to experience this. And we have conversations about how to deal with it. But don't be that leader. Don't accidentally be that leader who forgets that her team is a different time zone than her. And you think, can you get this done on Friday? And you're saying it Friday morning and it's their Friday afternoon. And they think they have to get it done by Monday. Don't be that leader. Look out for it. Okay, there you have. There's 9 passive-aggressive traits. If you'd like more information on those, I am creating a cheat sheet off the back of today's episode. So go to my website, tonicollis.com/stop-being-passive. And you can download a cheat sheet that goes through all of these things. To wrap up this episode, I want to talk about the cost of your passive aggressiveness and also how we need to grow beyond it. We need to recognize that when we're passive aggressive, we are creating an emotional toll, at least a frustration, anxiety, even burnout. Remember, burnout is caused by stress. If you are living in an environment where feedback is indirect, praise is withheld, communication feels like walking on eggshells, over time, this emotional strain causes disengagement, a loss of confidence in both the team and leadership. Your productivity is going to go down because miscommunication means that results are missed, deadlines are missed, inefficiencies come about, opportunities are lost. If you are the leader who procrastinates on decisions or doesn't give clear feedback, the team is left in limbo, unsure how to move forward. This stagnation has a real cost of time and resources. And it leads to a trust erosion. The culture is going to tank, quite frankly. Whether it's a silent treatment, a blaming others, whether you're enabling that, creates a toxic atmosphere where collaboration really suffers. People are hesitant to share ideas, fearful of taking on risks. Everything stagnates. High turnover rates will follow quickly. And here's the big one you need to hear. Your leadership credibility is going to plummet. It's going to take a hit. If your leadership credibility is already low, this might be a contributing factor. If your team doesn't respect you, this could be a contributing factor. If your peers don't respect you, this could be a contributing factor. If your boss doesn't, it could be it's likely to be something else as well, at least. I want you to have a look at this. Where are things not going well? Where do you lack your team following you, your team getting stuff done? Where is the culture of trust and collaboration missing? And is this likely to be caused by your behavior, at least in part? If you are ready to create a trust culture, a collaborative culture, make sure you do subscribe to my Leading Women in Tech Insider emails. That's where you get leadership tips, resources every week in the inbox. Head over to the show notes, grab the link to subscribe to our newsletter. It is the best place to find out all the stuff I teach my clients week in and week out. So to wrap this up, here are a few things I want you to be thinking about so you can step away from passive aggressive tendencies, stop them feeling ingrained, make sure you replace them with healthier, more constructive habits. First of all, start a practice of self-reflection. Ask yourself, have I ever avoided a difficult conversation? Have I been procrastinating? Am I giving vague feedback because I don't know what else to do? What was the outcome? Recognize the patterns that led up to that. That self-reflection is key. Then you want to move on to open communication. Are you direct? Are you honest? Are you saying things like, I guess you didn't think this through? Or are you trying to say, I'd love to understand your thought process here. Can we walk through it together? Direct communication is always going to build more trust and ensure your team knows where they stand far, far faster. But most of us don't do this straight out the gate. Next, remember that passive aggressiveness comes from emotions and also just a lack of awareness. Me folding my arms, that's just falling into it. I'm too tired to think. So I want you to work on mindfulness, calmness, self-awareness. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? What is the best way to express myself right now? Keep a mindfulness journal. Meditate. You need to stay composed. That is part of the job of a leader. You're the one that stays composed when nobody else does, especially in the face of a challenge. Which brings me to the final piece, reframe challenges. I think challenge is one of the most beautiful things about being a leader, but it's hard. Whether it's difficult conversations or conflicts, view them as an opportunity instead. Strengthen relationships, strengthen trust. Address a missed deadline directly, leading to better accountability moving forward rather than every single deadline being missed. Work on your emotional intelligence. Have a growth mindset. Build the trust and collaboration with your team and have self-confidence to let go of these inherent passive-aggressive traits. You're going to be clearer. You're going to be more authentic. You're going to be more confident as a leader, communicating with purpose and integrity because you know what matters. If you'd like to work through your passive-aggressive tendencies, make sure you go and grab the free cheat sheet that goes along with this episode. Head to the show notes to get the link. Remember, every small change you make, every way that you learn about yourself, every single thing is a ripple to make you a stronger, more confident version of yourself tomorrow and every day after that.